Hello everyone, I'm Mindang, and you're listening to Hidden Corners of the Case. Amidst the wild grassy hills lies a lonely pink dress, and on the victim's palm, a hastily written string of numbers, like a message from the darkness. From that chilling crime scene, the case file opened up a series of clues stretching over 18 years. Phone calls from public booths, furtive cash withdrawals, and a quiet rented house, as if deliberately erased of all traces. Who wrote that string of numbers, and what was it meant to point to? A person, a date, or a code from the mastermind behind the scenes? If you're ready, let's travel back in time together, piecing together every small clue to reveal the bigger picture hidden beneath the pink dress on Mok Chau Hill. On March 15, 2006, in a hilly area not far from the center of Mok Chau district, a middle-aged couple left their home early with the intention of picking some rare medicinal herbs. According to their account, at around 7:30 in the morning, the two of them were slowly surveying the hillside to look for the necessary bushes. The husband suddenly noticed a strange object that looked like a pair of legs sticking out from behind a low bush. At first, both of them hesitated, finding it hard to believe that they were actually human legs, since this area was rarely visited by people. However, a sense of unease quickly urged them to move closer to check. The wife whispered that it might just be a piece of wood or an old mannequin, while the husband insisted that something was off. As they approached the sloping ground, they were immediately stunned and terrified. Just as they had sensed, it was indeed a pair of human legs, exposed at the edge of the earth, with no shoes on. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the couple didn't dare linger. They hurriedly ran down to a nearby residential area to seek help. They used a landline phone at a local household and immediately reported the incident to the Mok Chau District Police. The report was quickly received, and a team of officers from the District Criminal Investigation Unit set out at once. However, the road up the hill was rough and difficult to traverse. The specialized vehicle had to overcome many steep sections before reaching the spot where the couple was waiting. By the time the police arrived at the scene, around 9 a.m., the two witnesses immediately pointed toward the bushes on the hillside, where they had first discovered the horrifying scene. The head of the investigation team ordered the scene to be preserved as is, while dividing the team. One group went down to the foot of the hill to cordon off the area, and the other proceeded directly to the location of the body. Just as reported, the police saw the body of a woman lying face down. Her pink dress had been pulled up almost to her waist, and she was not wearing any underwear on her lower body. The victim's hands were tied behind her back with a thin rope. The body was lying right at the edge of a slight slope, surrounded by sparse bushes. This was not a place where people usually passed by, making the presence of the corpse even more unusual. After confirming that the victim was dead, the technical team proceeded to photograph the scene and take basic notes. The victim was lying face down, with long hair spread out over the damp soil. At a glance, the examination team noted a large wound at the back of the victim's head, causing a patch of hair to be matted with dried blood, and deep ligature marks were clearly visible on the wrists. On the neck, arms and both thighs, there were numerous scratches and severe bruises, leading those present to suspect violent acts had occurred before the victim's death. Some members of the investigation team were reminded of cases involving assault and murder, as the state of the clothing and the way the wrists were bound suggested the victim had been subdued. The deputy technician also pointed out an area of lighter skin on the neck and left wrist, indicating that the victim had worn a watch or bracelet for a long time. Additionally, the victim had pierced ears but was not wearing earrings, leading everyone to suspect that valuable jewelry might have been taken by the perpetrator. From this, a preliminary hypothesis was formed. The perpetrator acted brutally to rob the victim, or for another purpose, then dumped the body in the deserted hill area. Without hesitation, the police chief immediately ordered a wide cordon around the surrounding area. A forensic officer, after checking the body temperature and signs of decomposition, determined that the victim had been dead for about 2 days, meaning the incident could have occurred on March 13, 2006. Upon closer examination, the forensic expert noticed that in addition to the head wound, there was subcutaneous hemorrhaging on the victim's neck, and severe damage to the hyoid bone, suggesting that the victim had been strangled until suffocation. At this point, no official conclusion could be made, but the initial assumption was that the victim was strangled, then the head struck or was struck, causing a fatal injury. Bodily fluid from the vagina suggested possible semen. Police sealed it for DNA testing. During the area search, an officer found a fist-sized rock with dark marks, suspected to be dried blood. A few meters away, another team found fabric mixed with leaves. On closer inspection, they saw it was women's underwear. What was unusual was that the rock was on a high mound, while the victim's body was on the slope. If the victim had been assaulted on this mound and then pushed or rolled down, it would explain why her body was covered in so many leaves and dirt. The forensic technicians took blood samples from the rock to compare with the samples from the victim's body. Although the results were not immediately available at the scene, it was highly likely that this was the victim's blood. After completing the photography and evidence collection, the police moved the body to the temporary morgue in Mok Chau district for a detailed autopsy. The preliminary examination showed that the victim was about 40 to 45 years old, of average height around 1.57 meters, with long black hair down to her shoulders, lightly painted fingernails, and wearing a fairly new pink dress. This led the investigation team to believe that the victim might have come from an urban area, or at least had the means to take care of her appearance. The fact that no identification papers, personal belongings, or books were found nearby further reinforced the theory that the perpetrator deliberately disposed of or took possession of the victim's property. An important question was raised: why would a victim dressed so elaborately appear in the middle of this deserted hilly area? The head of the examination team noted that it was rare for a woman to enter the mountains wearing a pink dress and high heels unless she had a specific purpose. From this, he proposed two initial hypotheses. First, the victim may have voluntarily accompanied someone, possibly an acquaintance, and was attacked unexpectedly. Second, the victim was restrained elsewhere and then brought to this area by the perpetrator. Both scenarios lead to a common point. The perpetrator was likely acquainted with, or at least had the opportunity to approach, the victim proactively. Returning to the surrounding area, the investigation team split up to search every tree and bush, but they did not find any clear evidence. The sloping terrain and dense vegetation made it extremely difficult to find any trace of high heels, if the victim had worn them, or a handbag. All efforts ended in failure. No scraps of paper, wallets, or mobile phones were found, and even the slope below showed no tire tracks. A police officer speculated that the perpetrator might have acted at night, then left via a detour several hundred meters away, where the ground was hard and left few traces. Even though it was just a hypothesis, the police did not want to overlook any clues, but clearly, there were almost no identifiable traces left at the scene. By nearly noon on March 15, 2006, the investigation team temporarily concluded their work at the scene, bringing the body, samples, and photographs back to the center. The authorities decided to file the case as a murder with an unidentified victim, and at the same time contacted the civil department, hoping to review if anyone had gone missing in the past 2 days. However, at present, Mok Chau had not received any missing persons reports that matched the victim's age and physical characteristics. This area is mainly inhabited by long-term local residents, with few outsiders, so if the victim is not from here, the investigation will need to be expanded to neighboring districts and cities. To speed up the process, the agency prepared a description of the victim. About 40 years old, around 1.57 meters tall, tanned skin, long black shoulder-length hair, lightly polished fingernails, wearing a pink dress, and carrying no ID. This description would be sent through the police network, asking district and city units to check their missing persons lists. Meanwhile, technical specialists plan to analyze the semen sample, hoping the DNA database would help cross-reference if the perpetrator had a criminal record, or had submitted a sample before. However, this would take time. While waiting, some officers suggested checking service establishments nearby. If the victim was brought from elsewhere, it was likely both the perpetrator and victim had appeared on a bus, taxi, or at a gas station before entering the hill area. Although the investigation was still new and only scratching the surface, all the investigators agreed that this was a serious case. The victim was attacked, assaulted, brutally murdered, and her jewelry was stolen. For many years, there had never been a similar case in Huimuchao, which put great pressure on the authorities. Everyone was waiting for information from neighboring districts or from the victim's relatives. It was hoped that once the identifying features were made public, someone would come forward. Around 3 p.m. that same day, the forensic examination team began a thorough inspection at the morgue. They measured the bruises, created a detailed photographic record, and documented all the injuries to the head area. Upon observation, the back of the victim's head was clearly dented, with visible skull fractures, indicating an extremely strong impact. The examination team continued to inspect the neck area, both arms, and the collarbone. They discovered wind marks and finger-shaped bruises, confirming that the victim had been strangled to the point of suffocation before being attacked. The victim's body showed that the arm muscles were firm, indicating that she was someone who exercised regularly. However, when restrained with a rope and suddenly attacked, she had little chance to resist. By late afternoon, the head of the investigation team directed everyone to focus on compiling a quick report to send to higher authorities. He requested all members to coordinate closely and screen security cameras along the main roads leading to Mokchao district from March 13 to March 15, 2006. Although the area was isolated, there was still a national highway and many interprovincial routes nearby. He emphasized that if the victim had traveled by car, there was a chance she would appear on toll booth or roadside cameras. Checking these would require time and manpower, but this was an important lead. If they could find images of the victim with anyone else, it could be the key to solving the case. That same evening, within the Mokchao District Police Department, the team worked urgently to update the system. Several officers hurriedly compiled reports of missing persons from neighboring districts. Although there were no immediate results, they still hoped that the victim's relatives or friends would be able to identify her through the description. In these first days, the entire investigation team worked urgently, with everyone agreeing that quickly solving this murder case, which involved robbery and assault, was crucial. Identifying the victim was the top priority. The perpetrator could not yet be identified, but at the very least, uncovering the victim's background would open up new leads for the investigation. By the end of March 15, 2006, progress had paused at the stage of collecting evidence and planning. The victim remained unidentified, leaving behind no trace of family connections. The investigative agency was determined to intensify measures, from conducting DNA tests to reviewing relationships, in order to soon shed light on the identity of the mysterious woman who had died in the hills of Mokchao district. On March 16, 2006, less than 24 hours after the scene was discovered, the Mokchao District Police Station received information from a man named Ton Jia Hao, 70 years old, residing in Hongshuyen District. Mr. Hao contacted the duty line to report that his daughter, Ton Ting Nhi, 45 years old, had suddenly lost contact since March 13, 2006. As soon as he heard the description of the victim in the case at the hill area, he was shocked and wanted to come to identify her. Over the phone, his voice was very calm, showing no signs of fear or agitation, and he repeatedly emphasized that his daughter had shoulder-length hair and liked to wear dresses when going out, which matched the description in the internal notice. Immediately, the police arranged for him to come to the temporary morgue to identify the body. At around 10 a.m., Ton Jia Hao arrived at the temporary morgue. After completing the necessary identification procedures, he was invited into the body storage room. As soon as he saw the woman lying on the examination table, Mr. Hao bowed his head and confirmed it. It was indeed his daughter. To further confirm his certainty, an investigator showed him several close-up photos of the victim's body features. Mr. Hao immediately recognized distinctive details such as the pale skin on her wrist from years of wearing a watch, and a small mole next to the left collarbone. Ton Tin Nhi, 45 years old, residing in Hongshuyen district, owned a well-known restaurant in the area. According to Ton Jia Hao's initial statement on the morning of March 13, 2006, Ton Tin Nhi told the family that she was going out on personal business. He did not ask for details, only noticing that his daughter was dressed neatly in a pink dress, high heels, wearing a Rolex watch, white gold earrings, and a platinum necklace. She left the house by taxi at around 9 a.m. When Tong Tin Ni forgot her phone on the table, Mr. Hao ran out in time to return it to her. He saw her standing by the roadside waiting for a car, but he couldn't clearly see the license plate or the taxi company. After that, Mr. Hao went back into the restaurant and did not continue to watch. Regarding her assets, Tong Tin Ni usually carried a handbag, which likely contained an ATM card. Her finances were stable thanks to income from the restaurant and renting out property. Everything proceeded as usual until that evening, when Mr. Hao called his daughter but could not reach her. The next morning, Mr. Hao thought Tong Tin Ni was busy with personal matters or on a short business trip, but by March 15th, she still hadn't come home. Her phone was turned off, which made him worried. When he happened to learn that the police were looking for the relatives of a female victim, Mr. Hao immediately got in touch. Thanks to that, the police confirmed that the victim was indeed Tong Tin Ni. The head of the investigation team immediately ordered a blood sample to be taken from Mr. Hao for a DNA paternity test, although there was hardly any doubt left about the identity. The next question that arose was, why did Tong Tin Ni, after leaving home on March 13th, end up in a remote hilly area and get brutally murdered? Who was the last person to see her, or did anyone have a conflict with her? The police invited Mr. Hao to stay at the station to provide more information. Through his statement, they learned that Tong Tin Ni had been married but had divorced her ex-husband, Truong Kien Hoa, who also lived in Hongshuyen district. Regarding his financial situation, Mr. Hao said, "My former son-in-law didn't have a stable job, always jumping from one thing to another. My daughter broke up with him because she was fed up with that life." However, after the divorce, Truong Kien Hoa occasionally stopped by the shop, claiming he wanted to see Tong Tin Ni's child from a previous relationship, but the child had moved elsewhere. A few times, Truong Kien Hoa suggested getting back together, but was flatly rejected. According to Mr. Hao, on March 13, 2006, right after Tong Tin Ni left home, Truong Kien Hoa came looking for her. That was the last time Mr. Hao saw him. It was unclear whether Truong Kien Hoa managed to catch up with the taxi or not. Based on this information, the police immediately listed Truong Kien Hoa as a suspect. Around 2 p.m. on March 16, 2006, a team of detectives went to Truong Kien Hoa's residence on the outskirts of Hongshuyen town. Local residents said that he had been absent for several days. It took the police more than half the afternoon until dusk to finally determine Kien Hoa's temporary workplace in Binnan district nearby. An investigator called ahead to the factory manager, where he was on probation, to arrange a meeting with him the following morning. The manager confirmed that Kien Hoa had been at the company dormitory for several days and seemed to have just gone home today. Early in the morning on March 17, 2006, the police team directly approached Truong Kien Hoa at his residence. During the conversation, Kien Hoa admitted that on March 13, he did go to look for his ex-wife, but only met Tong Jia Hao, his father-in-law. Knowing that Tong Tin Ni had just left the house, Kien Hoa ran to the end of the alley, but didn't see her, so he gave up on trying to meet her. On his way home, he happened to run into an old friend, Tran Tri Quang, who introduced him to a job in Binhan district. Kien Hoa agreed, and from the afternoon of March 13, he went to the company to take a look, staying at the dormitory until March 16. Colleagues at the company confirmed that he was present continuously and did not leave unexpectedly. When the police asked about Tong Tin Ni's murder, Kien Hoa appeared surprised and answered no. He stated that after his unsuccessful visit to her house, he had not contacted her at all. A preliminary check showed that his statement matched confirmations from factory employees, the dormitory entry and exit logs, and the factory gate camera footage from the night of March 13. And on March 14, Kien Hoa was continuously present at his workplace and did not leave at all. A technician who shared the same room also confirmed this for March 14. He took a nap for the entire afternoon in the dormitory. All of this further supports the likelihood that Truong Kien Hoa was not directly involved. However, the police have not completely ruled him out because other motives remain unclear and there is no concrete evidence. The investigation team temporarily concluded that the victim's ex-husband was unlikely to have committed the crime during this period. After ruling out the hypothesis that Truong Kien Hoa was the perpetrator, the police shifted their investigation toward the victim's wide social network. According to Tong Gia Hao, Tong Tin Ni was an independent woman who knew many men. Some were just friends, while others had tried to court her. Running a restaurant allowed her to meet a diverse range of customers. The list of people who might have had a close relationship with Ton Ting Ni included dozens of names. The police divided into several teams, each taking statements from some people on the list, focusing on finding anyone who met Ton Ting Ni on March 13th or had any special arrangements with her. During the interrogation process, an officer happened to review details collected at the scene, 7 digits written in ink on the victim's left palm, which were still legible. At first, the investigation team simply thought the victim had written down a number to remember. At this point, an officer speculated that it could be a landline phone number, since in 2006, mobile phones were not yet common in some rural areas and many people still used landlines. If Ton Ting Ni wanted to quickly jot down a number but didn't have any paper, she might have written it directly on her hand. This hypothesis was immediately reported and verified. About 2 hours later, the police contacted the telecommunications unit to help check the 7-digit number to see if it matched any landline phone numbers in Hongjuyan district or the surrounding areas. The results showed that it was a subscriber in Bak Long village, Thach Bin town, Hongshuyan district, registered to a house rented by a man with the surname Lu. This information was quite surprising because previously, Ton Jiahao had not mentioned anyone with the surname Lu having any connection to his daughter outside of their family. Therefore, the police did not rule out the possibility that this could be an important clue. At around 4 p.m. on March 17, 2006, the investigation team immediately proceeded to Bak Luang village for an urgent inspection. There, they discovered a house that was tightly locked and deserted. Local residents said that the tenant only appeared occasionally, coming and going, and few people knew what this person actually did for a living. Combining this with a review of the call history on Ton Ting Ni's mobile phone, the technical team found that the last 3 calls she received on the night of March 10th and the morning of March 11th all originated from public phone booths near Thach Bin town. The cameras at each phone booth captured images of a man driving up, getting out to make brief calls, and then leaving. The car that appeared at all 3 locations looked the same, and the man seemed very hurried, quickly returning to his car after each call. From there, the police officially raised their suspicions. The person who used the landline number in Bak Luang village was also the one who called the victim before she disappeared. It can be inferred that Ton Ting Ni may have been involved on March 11th or 12th, leading to the subsequent tragedy. In that context, the house in Bak Luang village became the focus of the investigation. However, on the afternoon of March 17th when the police arrived, the house was completely deserted. Neighbors had no idea where the tenants had gone, the wooden door was tightly locked, and there were no signs of anyone living there. The chief decided to assign someone to keep watch and wait for the suspect to return, while the rest of the team focused on gathering other evidence. They tried to identify the man who hurriedly left the phone booth. The security camera only captured a vague outline, with no clear view of the license plate, requiring the investigators to scrutinize every frame meticulously. On the evening of March 17th, the team in charge reported a new lead from Ton Ting Ni's mobile data. A total of 3 calls were made from public phone booths. All of these took place in less than 2 days before she went missing. An officer remarked that if the suspect was afraid of being traced, he would use a public phone booth instead of his personal phone. This detail made the whole team even more suspicious about the sophistication of the stranger, even though the initial motive was still unclear. The act of using multiple different phone booths to call someone with money and running a restaurant like Ton Ting Ni showed that the plan was anything but simple. Late at night, the police compiled all the facts, but they still didn't have enough evidence to confirm that the caller was the perpetrator. But this was the only promising lead at the moment. While waiting for the landlord in Bak Long village to show up, the investigation team continued to review traffic camera footage from March 11th to March 13th. They hoped to capture footage of Ton Ting Ni walking with the mysterious man. At the same time, they continued meeting her relatives and friends to find out if anyone knew Ton Ting Ni mentioned the person she was supposed to meet the previous weekend, or if anyone had tried to persuade her to collaborate on something. These efforts were still incomplete and would require more time to clarify. On the same day, the results of the initial autopsy provided additional important details. In addition to signs of strangulation and severe head trauma, the forensic doctor noted that the victim's genital area had suffered serious injuries. A semen sample was carefully preserved, ready to be sent for analysis. An officer commented, "If the suspect's name is in the criminal database, the police will quickly track them down. If not, the search for the suspect will become more complicated, requiring the comparison of multiple sources of information." From here, the entire investigation focused on three main directions. First, identifying the last person to have contact with Ton Tin Nhi. Second, clarifying the identity and current whereabouts of the person who rented the house in Thong Bak Luang. And third, checking other men on the victim's list of friends, partners, and acquaintances. The atmosphere at the police station became extremely urgent and tense. By the end of March 17, 2006, the clearest lead was still just the detail that the victim had written down a strange phone number and then received multiple calls from public phone booths near the time of her disappearance. All of this indicated that Ton Tin Nhi had arranged to meet a specific person, but the true identity of this individual remained a mystery. No one dared to assert that this was the perpetrator, as the case still required more concrete evidence. Mr. Ton Jia Hao cooperated closely, ready to provide any information about his daughter's habits and relationships. However, even he could not know all of Ton Tin Nhi's acquaintances, especially those she met at restaurants. The investigation quietly moved into the screening phase, gradually verifying suspicions related to the mysterious man, with the goal of gradually uncovering the secrets behind this tragedy. On the morning of March 18, 2006, the task force was dispatched to Bak Luang Hamlet, Thach Bin Town, Hong Shuyen District to continue verifying the landline phone number and the house that was locked. They coordinated with local police and asked around the neighborhood. A neighbor revealed that the owner of the house rarely appeared. He was often away, sometimes returning late, and would be gone again the next morning. According to accounts, this man was over 50 years old. He was reserved and lived very discreetly, rarely engaging in close conversations with anyone. Neighbors had seen him driving an old car, with a faded license plate that made it unclear where it was registered. Occasionally, he would bring a few friends home, stay for a few days, then lock up and leave again without anyone knowing where he went. This information was still insufficient to verify the identity or occupation of the homeowner, so the police team was forced to look for other clues to continue their investigation. An officer suggested checking the call history of the landline at the house. The technical department of the Tuyen Hong Shuyan police provided a list of incoming and outgoing calls from the past 10 days. Investigators paid attention to several outgoing calls made on March 10 and March 11, which matched the time frame when the victim's relatives reported receiving mysterious calls. The list also showed that this line was rarely used, which was unusual. For nearly a month prior, there were no calls at all, but suddenly on March 10 and 11, there was a flurry of calls. There were also a few short missed calls, but their content was unclear. All of this suggests that the person using the phone deliberately made multiple calls in quick succession and then disappeared. This indicates careful planning and intent. While the technical team was busy compiling the data list, another investigative team was assigned to visit the 3 public phone booths previously identified through camera footage, to directly question the managers and nearby vendors. The results showed that no one knew the identity of the middle-aged man who appeared in the blurry images. A convenience store owner recounted that he often bought phone cards or prepared small change in advance. After making a call, he would leave very quickly, never wearing a uniform or any distinctive clothing. However, when the police showed a few photos taken from the camera, the stall owner immediately recognized him. Yes, that's the man, about middle-aged, a bit stocky, with short hair. There were no further clues. At the same time, the special investigation team proposed reviewing locations the suspect might have visited, such as gas stations, small eateries, and repair shops around intersections. However, many places were not equipped with security cameras, or the cameras were positioned too far away, resulting in blurry and lacking detail images. Several gas stations in Thach Bin Town reported that on March 10 and 11, many cars stopped by to refuel. But no one could recall any specific features of the old car. The license plate was not distinctive, and it was driven by a middle-aged man. These limited descriptions made it difficult to identify the mysterious individual, while also suggesting that the suspect had used various tricks to avoid leaving any traces. After a day of effort, the only clear result was that the house in Bak Luang village had been rented by someone with the surname Lu. On the morning of March 19, 2006, the investigation team went to meet the authorities of Thatch Bin town, requesting records of residents, rental contracts, or temporary residence documents related to this house. The secretary of the Luke town office searched for quite a while before finding the name of the person who registered, Ton Lakan, 56 years old, originally from another province. According to the records, he began renting at the end of 2005. He registered his purpose as residence, but did not specify his occupation. The town had requested additional employment information, but had not received a response. The landlord did not live in Bak Luang village, only knowing that Mr. Lu paid rent every 3 months, usually slipping the envelope through the door slot when the landlord was absent. From here, the name Ton Lakan officially appeared in the investigation file. Although no conclusions had been drawn yet, he became a key figure because he was directly connected to the phone numbers found in the victim's hand and the calls made from the public phone booth. The case committee ordered that efforts be made to contact or meet Ton Lakan directly to verify. However, this proved difficult. The man was not at home, the door was tightly locked, and it was quiet inside. Neighbors confirmed that they had not seen his vehicle for many days. Around 2 p.m. on March 19, 2006, 2 detectives got closer, observing from outside through a window with iron bars. They saw that the room was completely empty, with no large furniture. Only in the corner of the house did there seem to be a few cardboard boxes. Since they did not have permission to search, the police could not break in. But in reality, the signs of habitation were minimal, making it very likely that Ton Lakan only used this place as a stopover, not as a regular residence. His caution and secrecy only made the investigation team more suspicious. In the end, they sealed the door. The informant reported the request to contact the police and then withdrew, continuing to assign people to keep watch and wait for another opportunity to approach. Also on the afternoon of March 19, 2006, another investigative team, following Sun Lakan's personal records, went to the address listed on his ID card, but the property had already been transferred to someone else. The people living nearby said he had moved away a long time ago, and no one knew where he was currently residing or how he was living. On March 20, 2006, the technical team conducted a DNA test on the semen sample collected from the body of the victim, Ton Tin Ni. The results showed no match with any criminal DNA data in the system, meaning the suspect had never been recorded before. This rendered the direct comparison method ineffective. Nevertheless, the police carefully preserved the sample, hoping it could be compared if samples from other suspects were collected. Regarding the victim's belongings, the investigative team continued to search for her handbag, jewelry, and mobile phone. They visited flea markets and pawn shops around Mok Chau and Hong Shuyen, in case the perpetrator tried to sell the stolen items. However, no results were obtained because all the pawn shops required legal identification from sellers. If the perpetrator was cunning, they might have already moved the stolen items out of the area. At the same time, the Criminal Investigation Department reported new information. Someone had seen a woman with a middle-aged man in an old car at around early afternoon on March 11, 2006, about 20 kilometers east of Mok Chau district. The woman was wearing a pink dress and matched the victim's description. The man had a mustache, fit the description, and appeared to be in his 40s. The person stopped at a roadside drink stall, then continued. When the investigator showed the stall owner a photo of Ton Tin Ngi, she confirmed it. There was a 70 to 80% resemblance, so it's likely Ton Tin Ngi got into that man's car. Although the driver's identity isn't confirmed, suspicion still points to Ton Lakan. Because the house he rented is also near this route, the bigger problem is that he has disappeared and cannot be contacted. The landline is disconnected, and no one knows about his mobile phone. On March 21, 2006, while the case committee was meeting to devise a new plan, the Hongshuyan District Police suddenly received a call from a woman who identified herself as Tran Le Quyen, currently in Tan An District. She said she needed to report that her boyfriend was injured and in the hospital, and asked the police for help in resolving a conflict with a creditor. At first, the duty officer intended to transfer the call to the Public Security Department. But when Tran Le Quyen mentioned the name Ton Lakan as her boyfriend, the duty officer immediately realized it matched the suspect they were searching for, and reported it to their superiors right away. That very day, a team of 4 investigators was sent to Tanan District to meet Tran Le Quyen, with the goal of verifying information and gathering clues related to Ton Lakan. On the afternoon of March 20th, 2006, through a summary report, the police learned the reason why Ton Lakan was on the run. He was being aggressively pursued by a loan shark group, and on March 20th, when the creditors came to his place, a violent altercation broke out. As a result, Ton Lakan suffered injuries to his face and limbs. Panicked by the situation, Tran Le Quyen quickly took Ton Lakan to the hospital in Tanan District. When she saw the police arrive, she had no idea she was involved in a murder case, and only wanted to ask the police to protect her injured boyfriend. However, the investigation team quickly verified the victim's identity, confirming that it was indeed Ton Lakan, 56 years old, who was being treated in the soft tissue injury ward with multiple bandages on his face. Immediately, the police stationed officers to guard him and prevent his escape. The situation became clearer when the police discovered several items next to the hospital bed. In Tran Le Quyen's metal bag, there was a black Nokia mobile phone, a platinum necklace, a pair of silver white earrings, and a women's Rolex watch. All of them almost exactly matched the description of the jewelry belonging to the victim, Ton Tin Nhi. The authorities separated Tran Le Quyen for questioning. She admitted that the jewelry items were gifts from her boyfriend on March 12, 2006, saying it was a surprise and that she did not know their origin or have any related documents. Regarding the phone, she insisted that Ton Lakan had found it somewhere. Immediately, the investigation team reported to the command and proceeded to check the email number on the phone, confirming that it matched the victim Ton Tin Nhi's device. It was certain that this was the property of the murdered person. The police then worked directly with Ton Lakan in room 7. At first, he admitted to keeping some pieces of women's jewelry, explaining that he had a rather close relationship with Ton Tin Mai, so she had willingly left them with him temporarily. However, when asked about March 13th, Ton Lakan gave evasive answers and did not provide a clear explanation. His injuries made it difficult for him to speak. However, the investigators noticed signs of deceit. Although there was not enough evidence to arrest him yet, the police conducted a preliminary assessment of the jewelry and phone, and made a full report. At the same time, an officer invited Ton Ra Hao to come in for identification. Mr. Hao immediately confirmed with certainty that the Rolex watch and platinum necklace belonged to his daughter. The old pink bag of Ton Tin Nhi had not yet been found, but this was enough to prove the act of appropriation. On the afternoon of March 21, 2006, the case committee held an emergency meeting, gathering all the collected materials. The hypothesis was put forward: Ton Tin Nhi and Ton Lakan might have known each other in some circumstance. After arranging a meeting, he took her belongings, and the victim was murdered and left in the hills. Although Ton Lakan claimed the items were gifts, his explanation was unconvincing, especially in the context of evidence of assault and murder. To strengthen the evidence, the technical team immediately collected blood samples and sealed Ton Lakan's personal belongings for comparison with the DNA sample from the victim's body. If the results match, Ton Lakan will become the prime suspect in the case. On March 22, 2006, the initial test results confirmed that the DNA sample taken from Ton Lakan was a complete match with the semen collected from the body of the victim, Ton Tin Nhi. This crucial turning point marked the identification of the main suspect. The head investigator ordered Ton Lakan's detention at the hospital. When notified, Ton Lakan looked scared and tried to bargain with police, promising to cooperate if they ignored his debts. Of course, the police rejected his proposal as the case involved serious murder charges. Despite still bearing injuries on his body, Ton Lakan was detained for investigation, while Tran Le Quyen was summoned for questioning. She claimed she had only known Ton Lakan for a few months, knew nothing about his business dealings, and had never heard of Ton Tin Angi. The investigation team continued to cross-check information to assess the accuracy of the statements. On the morning of March 23, 2006, when transferred to the Mok Chau District Police Headquarters, Ton Lakan still adamantly defended himself, insisting that his relationship with the victim was consensual. "We were in love," he explained, claiming that Ton Tin Ni had voluntarily given him her jewelry, and then unfortunately had an accident in the hills, insisting that he had nothing to do with it. This statement lacked detail and contradicted the signs of injuries, strangulation marks, and trauma on the victim's head. Furthermore, ATM camera footage at a bank in Hongshuyen district showed Ton Lakan withdrawing money from Ton Tin Ni's card on March 12, 2006. The bank confirmed that the account belonged to the victim. This is clear evidence that Ton Tin Ni's card had fallen into the suspect's hands, making it impossible for him to deny it in front of the camera. The telecommunications technical team continued to cross-check the victim's mobile signal. The phone number was last detected on the evening of March 11, 2006 at a station near Thatch Bin Town, matching with 3 calls made from public phone booths. After that, the phone went completely silent. On March 12, Ton Lakan used the ATM card to withdraw money. These clues form a tightly connected picture. First, the victim's jewelry, second, the victim's phone, third, the matching DNA sample, and fourth, the ATM withdrawal images. All of this points to a scenario in which Ton Lakan would have a hard time providing a reasonable explanation. Even so, Nai Pham tried to defend herself, saying she willingly lent Ton her card, or that they had an unexpected incident when she fell, so too panicked and ran. Investigators kept pressing. Why were the victim's hands tied? Why were there signs of strangulation? Why was the murder weapon a blood-stained rock found higher up? And why did the victim roll down the slope? All these details directly contradicted Ton Lakan's statement, and the panel fell silent. Still, the signs of guilt were clear. The police then conducted an emergency search of the house in Bak Luong village for more evidence. On the afternoon of March 23, 2006, the Special Task Force broke the lock and entered. They found no valuables, only a few unlabeled bottles of alcohol. There was a box with several bags of white powder, suspected to be opium-based medicine or painkillers, along with some used packaging. The team did not find the victim's wallet or identification, which may have been destroyed or hidden elsewhere by Ton Lakan. With the mounting and increasingly solid evidence, the investigative agency initially concluded that Ton Lakan had used tricks to lure or deceive Ton Tin Nhi into a secluded area where he committed the murder in order to steal her property. The method of committing the crime was extremely brutal, including strangling and smashing the victim's head against a rock. Although the investigation process still needed to thoroughly clarify every detail, at least the identity of the person currently possessing Ton Tin Nghi's illegally obtained property had been established. The basic motive was deduced. La Khan village was in debt and needed money, so they targeted a woman with stable financial means to commit the crime. On the night of March 23, 2006, Lakan was placed in a special detention cell. There was medical supervision, as the injuries had not yet healed. All related witnesses, from Tran Le Quyen, the owner of the guest house in Bak Luong village, to anyone who had ever come into contact with him, were summoned to provide detailed statements. The case committee assessed that there was sufficient basis to initiate criminal proceedings for the crime of robbery combined with murder. However, to complete the case file, they needed him to clearly state the process of approaching Ton Tin Nhi at the appointed meeting time, and the method he used to commit the act. At present, Ton Lakan continues to be evasive, insisting that he had no ill intentions and trying to argue that the accident happened due to the victim's own carelessness. Nearly 10 days after Ton Tin Ni's body was discovered, the police had obtained clear evidence proving that Ton Lakan had taken possession of her property and was directly connected to the time of the victim's disappearance. Despite his constant changes in testimony, the scientific evidence was irrefutable, laying the groundwork for the next phase of the investigation, pressing him to admit to his criminal acts. On the morning of March 24, 2006, Ton Lakan underwent his first official interrogation at the Mok Chau District Police Headquarters. He entered the room looking exhausted, with his hand bandaged and limping, facing two experienced investigators. In front of him was a complete case file, including crime scene photos, DNA test results, and bank camera footage of cash withdrawals. From the outset, he said he only wanted to explain when asked to clarify his possession of Ton Tin Ni's phone and jewelry. Ton Lakan shifted his story, claiming that the victim had given them to him because of their special relationship. According to his statement, on March 11, 2006, the two met at a cafe in Hongshuyan district to discuss cooperating on opening a restaurant branch. The victim appeared enthusiastic, and after their conversation, agreed to go with him. The police listened, but raised a series of questions. Why would she leave a stable, reputable job to partner with someone whose abilities had not been proven? Why did the victim's body show signs of assault? Why did you withdraw money from her ATM card without authorization? Each time he was questioned, he evaded, claiming he couldn't remember. He also said that on March 12 and 13, he faced financial trouble and borrowed her card to withdraw money early, but these details contradict the evidence. Investigators replayed the ATM camera footage. The victim was not there, which contradicted Ton Lakan's claim of being authorized to use the card. That day, the technical team submitted a new report to the case committee. The rope used to tie Ton Tin Ni's hands exactly matched the fiber and weave of a coil found in the Bak Luong village house. When asked why the rope matched, Ton Lakan said, "Maybe someone took my rope and used it." This was unconvincing. After over 4 hours of confrontation, investigators paused to organize files. That afternoon, detectives conducted a second, more focused interrogation. They asked Ton Tin Ni where he was on March 11. When pressed, Ton Lakan couldn't give an address. Police asked him to describe the cafe, staff, and receipt. He looked flustered and couldn't name the cafe. Records show Ton Tin Ni was reported missing the morning of March 13, and no one saw her leave on the 11th or 12th under unusual circumstances. When investigators questioned cafes in Hongshuyan, no one remembered seeing a couple matching their description. This test proved that Ton Lakan's testimony was completely unfounded. As questioning continued, Ton Lakan grew more anxious and asked for a break due to his injury. The investigation team stated, "We have a lot of scientific evidence. It cannot be denied." Under pressure, Ton Lakan confessed, "I had a relationship with her." She agreed. Later, "We argued about money." He added, "She slipped, hit her head. I panicked and ran away." The investigator then showed him crime scene photos. The victim's hands tied, tight binding marks, and a blood-stained rock. If it was just a fall, why are there binding marks? Why was her neck strangled? And why does the head wound not match a fall? Ton Lakan, flustered and sweating, still stubbornly avoided giving a direct answer. At 5 p.m. on March 24, 2006, the police conducted a confrontation with Tran Le Quyen. She stated that she met Ton Lakan through a friend and had officially been seeing him for a few months. She had no idea he was involved with someone else, nor was she infatuated with him. On March 12, Ton Lakan appeared at the restaurant and gave her a women's watch as a gift. The next day, he gave her a necklace and earrings. This was odd since Ton Lakan was in debt. She asked about the money, and he said it came from an investment withdrawal. Putting these facts together, the court found Ton Lakan was fabricating stories, and it was now about his cooperation. On March 25, 2006, the interrogation paused, and the team collected camera footage from around the bank where he withdrew the money. The images were of medium resolution, but they still clearly showed his face, looking around cautiously. Before handing over the card, he went in to withdraw the money and quickly left. The footage was recorded in the late afternoon of March 12, which completely contradicts the family's statement that Tontini went missing early in the morning of March 13. Clearly, it is likely that he had already taken possession of the card on the night of the 11th or early morning of the 12th, while the victim had not yet returned home. This raises a major question about the actual time the crime occurred, since the body was discovered on March 15, with death estimated to have happened about 2 days earlier, that is, on March 13. The fact that he could have done this as early as the 12th suggests that he may have subdued the victim before that time. Before March 25, 2006, the forensic team released additional results from the autopsy. It was noted that there were suspected traces of anesthetic substances in the stomach, or substances similar to certain latex-based drugs or powdered anti-motion sickness medications. The conclusion clearly stated that the victim may have ingested this substance just a few hours before death, which caused diminished reflexes and explains why Tontin Ngi was unable to resist forcefully. At the same time, the coil of rope found in Ton Lakan's house contained matching fingerprints, all of which were sealed as evidence. With almost every avenue for evading guilt closed off, Ton Lakan became less evasive but still stuck to his story that the victim went with him voluntarily and that everything was just an unfortunate accident. Late in the afternoon, a new turning point emerged when the investigator showed Ton Lakan a photo of the powdered medicine box found at his rented house. Preliminary forensic results showed this was a medicine that causes strong drowsiness if overdosed. Ton Lakan turned pale but did not fully confess. The team leader said, "We have enough evidence, you should tell us everything." However, he still did not admit to killing her, only saying he gave her the medicine for car sickness and it accidentally led to the incident. When the investigator presented arguments about the strangulation marks and blunt force injuries, he fell silent and asked to suspend the interrogation. The trial panel assessed that sooner or later he would have to bow to the evidence. On March 26, 2006, an internal meeting was secretly convened, during which the superiors analyzed the entire sequence of events. A witness was present, who was with the victim around March 11 or 12. 2. The DNA samples matched. 3. The victim's phone and jewelry were found in his possession. 4. Signs of using sedatives to control. 5. Blinding evidence of assault and battery. 6. Withdraw money from victim's card. 7. The autopsy showed death by suffocation and severe head trauma. All for a single copy. He lured or forced Ton Tin Ngi into the car, gave her sleeping pills pretending to prevent car sickness, then took her to a hilly area in Mok Chau district, where he tied her up, assaulted, and killed her. The special investigation team decided to end evidence collection for now, start prosecution, and continue interrogations to complete the case file. Although he had not confessed, the investigation team believed they had enough evidence to convict him. On the same day, the police received additional information and examined tire tracks around the scene. A faint tire mark was found on the roadside and leading to the hill area, with the width and tread pattern matching those of an old small car model. This matched the testimony of the drink vendor about the old car. The rough terrain meant there were no clearer traces left. However, it was enough to prove that a four-wheeled vehicle had entered the area before the victim was found, and the case file for prosecution grew thicker. By early morning on March 27, 2006, the authorities transferred Ton Lao Kan from the Mok Chau District Detention Center to a medical facility for further injury examination. There, they took the opportunity to question Tran Lequian again, asking her to provide more information. She recalled the detail. On March 10, he told me over the phone that he was going to take care of some personal matters. On March 11, he cut off all contact. It wasn't until the afternoon of March 12 that he finally showed up again, bringing sand with him. This timing coincides with the public phone calls the victim received, which may have been made by him to arrange the meeting. This inadvertently contradicts his claim that he only met the victim briefly and was given jewelry. On the afternoon of March 27, 2006, the Special Investigation Team decided to add more charges. The charge of robbery was added against Ton Lakan, and the lawyer was fully informed. They emphasized that the evidence collected was sufficient to proceed with prosecution according to the law. Although he still maintained his right to plead not guilty, in reality, all traces and physical evidence matched completely. His attempts to evade responsibility could not change the situation. By around 5 p.m., the interrogation session ended early. He only repeated, "I am innocent," but provided almost no new information. Investigators were determined to complete the prosecution file, not needing a confession since physical and documentary evidence was already enough to expose the act. The next step is a thorough review to detect possible accomplices or others involved, but based on collected data, the likelihood he acted alone is very high. The act was assessed as premeditated, involving luring the victim, using drugs, taking them to a secluded place, then disposing of them. Afterwards, he calmly withdrew money and gave gifts to his girlfriend as if nothing had ever happened. That evening, the preliminary case file was sent to the district to request transfer to judicial authorities. Though he refused to confess further, the Special Investigation Team said the evidence was clear. They also checked his credit and debt history to clarify the motive. Numerous signs indicated that he was being pursued by creditors, urgently needed money, and targeted the victim after learning that they were financially well off. Police have determined that, for now, he will be charged with murder and robbery. If all the elements of the crime are established, he could face the harshest possible sentence. However, to make a final decision, they are still continuing to complete official forensic examinations on the samples, organize the identification of evidence, and take witness statements. At this point, the identity of the suspect responsible for the horrific murder in the Mok Chau area has been established. With irrefutable evidence, the entire investigation process focused on clarifying every detail, ensuring that not a single corner was overlooked. On March 28, 2006, a team of investigators from the Special Task Force was sent to Hong Shuyan District to conduct a deeper check into Tulakan's past. Based on records and registers from administrative agencies, they found that he had changed his household registration multiple times, each time moving to a different place. The task force went to an old address, about 30 kilometers from Thatch Bin town, which had previously been recorded as his place of residence. The local residents only vaguely remembered that, a few years ago, there was someone with the surname Lu living there. He was middle-aged, lived there for a while, then disappeared. At that time, he rarely interacted with others and did not reveal his occupation. These scant clues led the police to believe that Tonlakan Phuoc's background was far more complicated than that of a simple con artist. When reviewing all records related to Tonlakan's marital life, the investigation team discovered that he had officially registered for marriage 3 times. The divorce records and death certificates of his former wives all existed, but they were scattered and disjointed. Accordingly, his first wife died in 1992 due to a fall accident. His second wife passed away in 1994 due to a traffic accident. His third wife died in 1996 from falling down the stairs. Each incident occurred in a different location and had never been considered from a criminal perspective. At that time, the local authorities only prepared a brief report, concluded it was an accident, and proceeded with cremating the bodies at Tonlakan's request. Immediately afterward, he abruptly left his place of residence. This tragic series of events, when viewed from an investigative perspective, raised many suspicions, according to sources at the Old Town office. The investigation team learned Tonlakan received substantial life insurance payouts after each wife passed away. Checking the documents, they found he was the sole beneficiary of all policies. Several insurance companies had sent suspicious information to authorities, as within 4 years, he collected payouts from 2 wives, each time amounting to hundreds of thousands of yuan. However, due to lack of direct evidence of murder, the case was not prosecuted, especially since the bodies had been cremated, making re-examination impossible. On March 29, 2006, the Special Investigation Team sent a group to work with insurance company representatives. One representative said they considered refusing the third claim due to suspected fraud. However, he completed all the medical paperwork showing his wife died in an accident with no signs of foul play. All procedures were done quickly, the body was cremated, leaving no chance to verify anything about the children. According to civil records, Tonla Khan had one son with his first wife, an adopted son who was the second wife's biological child, and a youngest daughter whose biological status is unclear. Both sons have died, one in 1993 from health complications, the other in 1995 for unclear reasons, with the registry only noting sudden cardiac arrest. The youngest daughter is still listed, but her current whereabouts are unknown. Police reopened the childhood death cases. At that time, local medical authorities only concluded the victims did not survive emergency treatment. The family did not request an autopsy and proceeded with a quick cremation. An investigator noted that too many misfortunes had happened in the same family. Individually, they might seem like bad luck, but together, it was hard to believe. On March 30, 2006, the Special Investigation Team met to discuss expanding the investigation into old deaths related to Tonla Khan. Although he is now detained for the murder of Tontin Ngi, if more evidence about the past incidents is found, the case will become even more serious. The team leader assigned a group to search through the hospitals and clinics that had previously recorded the deaths of his wife and children. The work faced many difficulties because so much time had passed, many places no longer kept paper records, and several key witnesses had either moved away or passed away. Nevertheless, the investigation team remained determined, believing that some remaining details could reveal the methods he used to carry out these notorious acts. At the same time, another detail also drew the attention of the investigation team. Some old acquaintances had expressed suspicions about Tonla Khan's gambling debts. In 1997, he fell into the vicious cycle of gambling, which led him to borrow money everywhere. Strangely, every time he faced financial difficulties, a death would occur around him, after which he would receive insurance payouts and benefit financially. Although they couldn't press charges based solely on rumors, the investigation team considered this an important lead to interview creditors and those who had close contact with him. On March 31, 2006, when meeting someone who claimed to be a middleman, the group gambled with Tonla Khan. The police learned that he was extremely addicted to gambling. After losing everything multiple times, he would disappear for a while, and each time he resurfaced, he would have a large sum of money, enough to pay off old debts and continue getting caught up in a new cycle. This person claimed to have once suspected him of cheating or being involved in shady dealings but did not know the specific details. All this information reinforced the belief that he may have committed numerous illegal acts in the past but had never been thoroughly investigated. Also on March 31, 2006, the Special Task Force sent 2 investigators back to the detention center to meet directly with Tonla Khan, focusing on clarifying his background. This time, they did not mention the Tong Tin Nhi murder case, but instead focused on past incidents. He appeared evasive, citing personal family reasons, and saying he did not want to talk about his previous wives. When police questioned him about his biological son who died in 1993, he changed the subject, insisting the boy died from a congenital illness. For his adopted son, who died in 1995, he glossed over it, claiming it was due to an infection, and that he did not remember details. Investigators suspected he was downplaying the situation, which strengthened their resolve to reopen the case files. On April 1, 2006, the Special Investigation Team received new documents from former insurance companies. In 1994, Tonla Khan had received a large payout after his second wife suddenly passed away. In the compensation file, he listed medication costs and hospital bills, but the accident description was vague, just a late-night car accident. There were no witnesses. He claimed the car lost control, his wife died, and he himself suffered minor injuries, treated at a private clinic. However, when the police checked public hospitals near the supposed accident site, they found no records at all, so he might have really gone to a private clinic. But if he fabricated everything, this would be his way of destroying evidence. An investigator noted that on April 2, 2006, the Special Task Force held a meeting to compile all suspicions related to the most recent murder case and the previous deaths. They speculated that he might have used the same method, staging accidents and then burning the bodies to prevent autopsies. With each case, he became more sophisticated, learning how to avoid suspicion and thoroughly understanding insurance procedures. The biggest challenge now was that records from years ago were still incomplete, lacking full autopsy reports. One investigator questioned whether there might be other victims who had disappeared in connection with him, but had not yet been identified. This idea sparked a lively discussion among the group, as there were rumors about 2 women who had mysteriously gone missing, though no official relationship with him had been established. However, all these connections still needed to be carefully verified. As attention focused on Tulakan, the task force received several calls providing new information. One person claimed that their mother had once worked at the same office as him, and then suddenly disappeared under unusual circumstances. Another person expressed suspicion that their sister vanished after borrowing money from him. Although there was no concrete evidence yet, the police still recorded these reports for screening and further monitoring. On April 3, 2006, 2 investigators were assigned to review and cross-check the list of unresolved missing persons cases. By comparing the times and locations, they discovered that at least 2 women, aged between 35 and 40, had disappeared without a trace and were provisionally considered to have left the area in 1998 and 2000. Although no direct connection to him had been established, these details were still carefully stored in the investigation file. On the morning of April 4, 2006, the head of the Special Investigation Team decided to interrogate Tonlakan Them about suspicions from many years prior. When the investigator mentioned the names of the 2 missing women, he immediately reacted, saying, "I don't know them." The police only had external descriptions and a few old photos provided by the families, which could not yet be cross-checked with any concrete evidence linking him. However, the way he brushed off every question only made the Special Investigation Team more convinced that clues were being concealed. The next step, they sent an official request to the local police where the 2 women had lived before they disappeared, hoping to verify whether there was any evidence indicating a connection to him. That same afternoon, an indirect witness was invited to the Mokchao District Police Station. This person, who had worked as a security guard at a resort, testified that in July 1998, he had seen Tonlakan with a woman named Chao Bao Chan. This woman was later reported missing by her family. They checked into the resort and left the next day, without showing any unusual behavior. However, a week later, when he returned to work, the witness heard that the woman had not returned home. He had no direct evidence, only a clear memory of her appearance. The police recorded this information. Although it was not enough to constitute a crime, it fit the hypothesis that he had previously associated with missing women, forcing the investigation team to look for more witnesses. On April 5, 2006, the task force went to the local notary office to review all loan and mortgage transactions related to Tonlakan over the past 10 years. Several scattered records showed that he often signed loan agreements, mortgaged assets, and then paid them off after a few months, and he did this more than once. He mortgaged assets under his wife's name. When his wife passed away, he settled the contract, retrieved the documents, and then disappeared from the area. These behaviors reflect his financial cycle. Until recently, notary offices only stored records without assessing their legality. On April 6, 2006, the police compiled all the information and reached a preliminary conclusion. Tulakan was involved in at least 3 deaths of family members, collected insurance money, and then relocated. His 2 sons also died under suspicious circumstances. There is reason to believe that he concealed his methods under the guise of family accidents. Because the incidents happened sporadically and each area handled them separately, no one noticed the whole picture. Only when the Ton Tichingi murder case broke out did a review of the past reveal the chain of events. A major problem is that there are no remains of his ex-wife and son because they were cremated, destroying direct evidence. Still, the special investigation team was determined to pursue the case, to fully expose the entire series of his actions. On April 7, 2006, the deputy head of the case team proposed forming a separate group to approach Ton Lakan, applying psychological tactics in hopes that he would gradually confess. The police reconstructed the scenario, pointing out the similarities between the victim's death and a series of previous accidents, in order to pressure him into revealing part of the truth. Nevertheless, when confronted directly, he still adamantly denied any involvement in the previous incidents, only focusing on the story of accidentally causing the accident related to Ton Tinggi. The case team noted his stubborn attitude, but that did not make them back down. Another point that caught the investigators' attention was the results of his financial review. For nearly a decade, he continuously opened multiple accounts with unusual cash flows. In 1996, after his third wife passed away, he received an insurance payout. By 1998, a large sum of money was deposited and then completely withdrawn. The origin is unclear, and the police now suspect this is money he embezzled from a missing woman. However, old bank records are difficult to access and require authorization from the Financial Supervisory Agency, so the information remains inconclusive. On the afternoon of April 8, 2006, the case investigation team issued an internal notice requesting police in neighboring districts to review death and missing person records that might be indirectly related to him. They specifically focused on meeting with the victim's relatives and friends to closely examine the situation. Anyone who had ever seen him appear near the scene of the incidents, if more witnesses could be gathered, the net would tighten further. Although an official conclusion could not yet be made, the chain of suspicion stretched over decades. At the same time, those who voluntarily came forward to provide information were all recorded and categorized as potential leads. On April 9, 2006, an experienced officer assessed that the suspect was likely familiar with legal loopholes in remote areas where previous investigations had not been thorough. He took advantage of the situation to cover up his crimes. Based on this observation, the case team predicted there would be many surprises ahead. Although the murder of Ton Tinggi was brutal, given the mounting suspicions, this might not have been his first crime. Some members proposed the hypothesis that this could be the culmination of a long-standing pattern of criminal behavior. On the ground, the task force collected a large amount of information about his past actions, from insurance-related suspicions to unusual signs whenever a relative died suddenly. However, to have enough grounds to reopen old cases, breakthrough evidence was needed. They interviewed many people, gathered documents, and even re-examined burial sites, taking samples if any remains were left. This was a journey that would take a lot of time and certainly would not yield quick results. In that context, the case team continued to focus on completing the main file for the murder of Ton Tinggi, believing that prosecuting him for murder and robbery would be the first step. By the end of April 9, 2006, all documents regarding Ton Lakan's personal life had been fully compiled. Every old detail was arranged into a diagram with many overlapping suspicions. The police made notes in the margins about serial patterns, taking wives, constantly changing residences, and receiving insurance payouts from relatives who died under unusual circumstances. In addition to his wife and child, the two missing women also became suspects, and the case file grew thicker, while he remained calm, neither admitting fault nor cooperating. The special investigation team concluded that more time was needed to consolidate the evidence, and they were prepared to file additional charges if crimes were discovered in other cases. On April 10, 2006, the special investigation team held a meeting to review all the newly collected evidence. The main goal was to turn the suspicions about his past into a clear basis for prosecution, while also ensuring that the murder of Ton Tinggi was not separated from, or overlooked in, the chain of related behaviors. One investigator raised the issue: if he had indeed committed multiple crimes, he must have had very sophisticated ways of covering them up. Perhaps he was used to staging accidents, exploiting relationships to set traps for his victims, and combining these with his habitual behaviors, constantly changing his place of residence. The investigation team clearly determined that he deliberately moved around to erase his tracks. Meanwhile, efforts to check the medical records at hospitals that had previously treated his wife and child yielded almost no results. Many places had destroyed or no longer kept the old diagnostic records. Some medical staff had already retired and their memories were no longer accurate. However, a retired doctor provided crucial information. In 1994, he had treated a woman with a severe brain injury caused by hitting a hard object, who was brought to the clinic in the middle of the night. The man claiming to be her husband said the victim had been in a traffic accident, but after a few hours, the victim died, and her body was taken home for funeral arrangements early the next morning. The doctor described the husband as middle-aged and stocky. When the police showed him a photo of Tonla Khan, he confirmed that the resemblance was strong. This became an important piece of the puzzle to connect the death of his second wife. The case was quickly closed because the family did not request a thorough investigation, there was no clear accident scene, and the police recorded the doctor's statement as indirect evidence. Based on this clue, on April 11, 2006, the Special Investigation Team held a meeting to discuss a plan to approach him directly, using the information from the doctor to intensify the interrogation. They wanted to know how he would explain his wife's severe brain injury, which did not match the typical pattern of a traffic accident. Around 3 p.m., two investigators entered the interrogation room and asked direct questions. In 1994, under what circumstances did your wife die? He ignored the question, only saying that his wife had a serious accident. The police continued to press. Why is there no record from the traffic police? Why did you take your wife to the clinic and then arrange her burial the very next day? He replied that it was the family's wish, then remained silent. His evasive answers only strengthened the investigation team's suspicion that there was collusion. That same day, another line of inquiry was pursued at insurance offices, where the investigation team cross-checked all contracts under Tonla Khan's name. They discovered that he had also received an insurance payout when his son died in 1993, with the reason given as a serious illness. However, the medical records were unclear. The insurance company confirmed the payout based on certification from a private hospital. The entire process happened quickly and without objection. This pattern repeated many times. The victim died suddenly, the body was cremated, the family did not request an autopsy, and the insurance was paid out in full. The company had even once classified Tonla Khan as high risk, but at that time they lacked the means to investigate further, so they had to accept it. The team of investigators gathered further evidence showing that he continuously benefited financially from these deaths. On April 12, 2006, the Special Task Force decided to assign an experienced investigator to approach him directly in the detention cell, using indirect questioning methods to extract information. This tactic aimed to elicit details that he might inadvertently reveal about his previous actions. However, he appeared extremely cautious, limiting communication with anyone, only occasionally. He uttered vague statements like, "I once wanted a good life," or "I was unlucky." These words were generic and did not provide any useful information to the investigators. The investigation team concluded that it might be necessary to switch to another tactic or wait for the results of the financial assessment, while also cross-checking with additional witnesses to strengthen the evidence. On April 13, 2006, the investigation team received feedback from the police in another locality, where a woman had gone missing in 1998. They sent a copy of the report submitted by the victim's family, in which it was briefly mentioned that the woman had once borrowed money from a man with the surname Liu. Although it could not be confirmed that this was the same man, the police still included this information in the case file. The victim's family has now moved to another province, so they have not been able to cooperate directly. The suspicion that he might be connected to multiple disappearances is growing. By April 14, 2006, the Special Investigation Team completed a summary report for the phase. The document clearly states that he is directly involved in the murder of Ton Tin Ni, and there is also reason to suspect that he exploited legal loopholes to commit multiple killings for profit or to resolve financial disputes. The report was submitted to higher authorities, proposing to expand the investigation across provinces. However, the priority remained to complete the case file to charge him with the murder of Ton Tin Ni, as the evidence was already sufficiently convincing. If the old suspicions were prosecuted, it would take more time to gather evidence and could not be done quickly. While the expanded case file was processed, on the morning of April 15, 2006, a new development emerged. Ton Mai Lin, his youngest daughter, came to the police station and stated she was the suspect's biological child. After checking the records, it was confirmed her name was in the household registry as the daughter of his second wife. She had lived with relatives since childhood and rarely saw her father. When police asked why, she said it was due to family conflicts. After her mother died while she was still a child, he left her with her aunt and disappeared. In the few times she saw her father later, he only talked about money and his debts. Ton Mei-ling did not know the details of the accidents or her father's role in her mother's death, but she remembered that after her mother died, he quickly had the body cremated and then disappeared. This information again matched what the special investigation team had suspected. On the evening of April 15, 2006, the deputy head of the team proposed a meeting between Ton Mei-ling and her father, Ton Lakan. In the detention center, with the hope of creating psychological pressure, the investigation agency initially expected that he would, for the sake of his daughter, reveal part of the truth. But the result was completely unexpected. According to the report, the meeting was brief. He only asked a few questions about Ton Mei-ling's daily life. Absolutely no mention was made of any past events. She also did not dare to directly confront him. When it ended, he turned his back, and in the absolute silence, the police determined that they could not count on this meeting to get a confession. On the morning of April 16, 2006, the Special Task Force continued to carry out an important step. They compared Ton Lakan's DNA sample with some traces collected from the two previous assault cases, but the results were not promising because there were no corresponding samples left from the time the incidents occurred. In particular, the remains of his ex-wife and son had already been cremated, making exhumation impossible. Faced with these difficulties, the investigation team concluded that without additional direct witnesses or a confession from him, it would be nearly impossible to prosecute the old cases. They focused on bringing charges for the murder of Sun Jingni, where the evidence was now solid and irrefutable. On April 17, 2006, representatives from the authorities informed the Special Investigation Team that the process of prosecuting Ton Lakan for murder and robbery in Mok Chau district would soon be initiated. The files related to past cases will be considered for additional prosecution if sufficient legal grounds are found, even though it may not be possible to thoroughly resolve all previous suspicions. At the very least, the key case has been secured. This internal information brings reassurance to the investigation team, as the risk of him exploiting legal loopholes to escape punishment has been somewhat contained. Everyone admits to wanting to uncover more of the old cases, but the priority remains to immediately deal with the murder of Ton Tin Ngi. On the same day, the security forces proposed transferring Ton Lakan to the Provincial Detention Center for stricter management. The Special Task Force agreed, emphasizing the risk that he could take advantage of his network of friends in the gambling world. Please subscribe to the Gien Migo channel for Bipao, so you don't miss any important updates or details. The exciting videos and some procedures related to the assets. The mobile phone and jewelry seized from him were verified to belong to the victim, meeting the requirements to be designated as evidence before being returned to the family. Mr. Ton Jia Hao, the victim's father, expressed his desire for justice and praised the efforts of the police, hoping that all of the perpetrators' crimes would be exposed. This event became an important motivation for the Special Investigation Team to continue probing the series of mysterious cases from the past, even though the possibility of prosecution still faced many challenges. From April 19, 2006, the atmosphere in Mok Chau district calmed down somewhat as the murder case file had been basically completed. Some investigators were withdrawn from the scene, leaving only a few people to continue reviewing details related to deaths and cross-checking statements from Tonlakan's friends. According to records, many creditors said he was very skillful in managing, sometimes even creating cash flow to cover his debts. The debts accumulated over 5 months were rarely paid off all at once. He often used a revolving method, but this time seemed to be at a dead end. That's why he recklessly chose a wealthy victim, leading to serious consequences, one creditor commented. They expressed a mix of surprise and anger upon learning that he was arrested for murder, especially if the stolen money had already been used to pay off debts. On April 20, 2006, the Special Investigation Team issued an internal notice to all relevant parties, emphasizing that they would continue to monitor for any signs related to previous cases. If there is evidence that Tonlakan harmed his relatives in the past, he will be strictly dealt with. Thanks to this, the case file on Tontin was temporarily closed, as all elements constituting the crimes of murder and robbery were present. It is expected that he will enter the judicial process and have to answer a series of questions about his criminal acts. The remaining issues related to previous cases depend on the ability to prove and collect additional evidence. By the end of April 20, there were virtually no more legal obstacles to charging him with the murder of Tontin Ngi. However, the Special Investigation Team was determined not to stop. A special task force continued to gather clues, hoping to fill in the gaps related to the series of family tragedies. Even though they knew the chances of examining a body that had long been cremated were almost zero, they still questioned every witness who had observed unusual conflicts around the suspect's home. The final outcome could not yet be known, but their determination to pursue the case to the end was clear. On April 21, 2006, a crucial interrogation session was arranged in the interrogation room of the Provincial Detention Center. 2 investigators from Mokchau district brought with them an updated file focusing on the suspicions surrounding the family incidents in which Tonlakan was now under suspicion. The main objective was to clarify whether the method used in the murder of Tontin Ngi was related to or similar to the sudden accidents involving the suspect's wife and son. Before the interrogation began, they took time to review several details that had never been questioned in previous sessions, based on information collected from the insurance company. The doctor's confirmation regarding the case of traumatic brain injury suffered by the second wife, as well as the hospital records related to the second wife's biological son, who was taken to the emergency room but died the following day. These points were considered crucial, intended to create new psychological pressure and force him to reveal any hidden information. At around 8:30 in the morning, Tonlakan was brought into the interrogation room. His hands were still cuffed, his face stern and reserved, showing no emotion. An investigator began in a firm tone. "Do you remember the incident when your second wife had a traffic accident in 1994? He answered slowly, saying that was something from long ago and had nothing to do with this case. With that evasive attitude, the investigator continued. "We have information from a clinic doctor who was present when the victim was brought in for emergency treatment. The severe wound at the back of the head closely resembled a blunt force injury, not a typical traffic accident impact." Hearing that, he frowned, but still maintained his stance. "I don't know which doctor you're talking about, nor do I know what he said." Next, they questioned the reason for the body being cremated so quickly. He was silent for a few seconds before answering. "Some family customs require immediate burial or cremation to avoid prolonged grief." This explanation was unconvincing, because the 2 investigators had compared the cases of the first wife and the son. The same scenario. The victim was taken to a medical facility, then the paperwork was withdrawn, and cremation was arranged. Within just 1 day, records from the insurance company showed that every time there was a claim for compensation citing an accident as the cause. Suddenly, he requested to end the interrogation due to fatigue. Seeing that they were met with a wall of silence, one of the investigators changed tactics, shifting to the case of Sun Jingyi's murder, and asked, "What method did you use to control the victim? Was it similar to the way you handled the previous cases?" he immediately cut off the conversation. He denied ever committing similar crimes and brushed aside every detail related to the deaths of his wife or child. Even so, the investigation team did not lose heart and remained persistent. After more than an hour of tense questioning, the interrogation was temporarily paused, and the team leader took a break before returning. This time, he brought a stack of photos along with a detailed report and old insurance documents, including a handwritten autopsy report. The doctor clearly noted suspicions that the victim had suffered a severe blow to the head. Although the documents did not have absolute legal value, they exerted clear pressure, forcing him to turn each page and carefully examine the evidence. At one point, he faltered slightly, but still insisted it was just an accident. Since the direct approach was ineffective, on April 22, 2006, the case committee shifted their strategy, focusing on finding witnesses who had seen conflicts within Tonla Khan's family. They contacted a woman who used to be close friends with the third wife, hoping to gather more clues. When questioned, this person revealed a fierce argument between the couple just a few days before the wife passed away. She didn't catch the details, only that the third wife said she didn't want to transfer the property into her husband's name. After that, she died from falling down the stairs. At that time, he had reported to the ward police that his wife had low blood pressure and unfortunately slipped. The ward police did not suspect anything because the family confirmed his statement. After the incident, he received additional insurance money because he was the policyholder. On April 23, 2006, all the collected information was brought into a new interrogation session. For the first time, the investigators showed Tonla Khan the testimony of the third wife's close friend, emphasizing the conflict over property ownership before the wife passed away. Upon hearing this, he immediately denied it, saying anyone could make up that story and that he knew nothing about it. However, his eyes and gestures clearly revealed his confusion. Noticing this weakness, one of the investigators pressed further, asking if it was true that the victim did not want to transfer ownership of the house to him, which led to arguments. He shook his head and requested to end the session. This time, the police noted a rare display of hostility, completely different from his usual calm demeanor. On April 24, 2006, a veteran officer from the Provincial Police Department joined the special case meeting. He proposed using an information trap method, spreading false information that they were about to find bone samples or old evidence related to the second wife's accident in order to observe the suspect's reaction. That afternoon, in the interrogation room, an investigator stated that we already had matching evidence at the place where the victim was buried, not cremated. They knew the second wife had been cremated but still gave out that information. Contrary to expectations, he showed no fear, only suspicion, saying, "You are lying, I know she was cremated." The tactic failed, and he stayed vigilant. On April 25, 2006, other witnesses appeared. Someone from the old neighborhood said that before the third wife died, that night, they heard a loud thud, thinking at first it was something falling. The next day, they saw the family car leave the house, take the body to the hospital, then return to handle funeral arrangements. Still, this detail was not enough to convict him, as there was no direct observation of violence. The investigation team concluded that previous cases all happened in areas with little foot traffic. He was used to deserted spaces and nighttime. On April 26, 2006, the Special Task Force discussed expanding their strategy. Without forensic evidence from autopsies, it would be very difficult to charge him with murdering his former wife and child. They decided to focus on the two women who went missing in 1998 and 2000, hoping there might still be traces not yet destroyed. In these cases, he could not cremate the victims since he lacked a legal relation with them. The surveillance team was sent to where the women had lived, tracking through sand mines, deserted lots, and remote forests. Hoping to find remains or personal belongings, after many days of searching, nothing concrete was found because too much time had passed. Despite the deadlock, the Special Investigation Team was determined not to give up. On April 27, 2006, a relative of one of the missing women requested help in searching for old documents and photos. The family suspected she had once borrowed money from Ton Lakan, but there was no evidence. The investigator advised them to go through their old notebooks, hoping to find a clue. Sure enough, they discovered a loan note from 1998 with an illegible signature. Only the surname was clear, though it was not enough to confirm it was the same person. However, this detail was added to the case file. On April 28, 2006, the investigation team spent half a day reviewing all possible scenarios. He had arranged to meet the women in secluded places, committed the crime, and then disposed of the bodies. The Tontin Nhi case also followed a similar pattern, except the body was found on a hill. The common point was attacks to the head or strangulation, followed by hiding the body. However, with only a hypothesis and no physical evidence, they could not file charges. They returned to focus on his statements, hoping that repeated confrontations would make him slip up. On April 29, 2006, intense interrogations continued. An investigator began by describing in detail the events of the Tontin Nhi murder. "We have gathered enough evidence. You drugged the victim's water, causing her to lose consciousness, then tied her hands and brutally struck her on the head. Then you pushed the body down the slope. Why did you do that?" Hearing this, he seemed unsettled but quickly denied it. "I don't know. It's all speculation." The police continued. "This is the same method as previous incidents. The victims all had severe head injuries. No one survived." He closed his eyes, stayed silent, and did not respond. On April 30, 2006, the deputy head of the Special Investigation Team concluded he would not confess. So, they shifted strategy, focusing on strengthening the evidence in the Tontin Nhi case as their main card. Although they wanted to unravel all the behaviors spanning 18 years, forcing a direct confession was impossible. The police hoped that when he realized he would definitely be convicted for the most recent case, he might want to negotiate for a lighter sentence, and only then would he reveal more. All documents related to previous incidents were carefully stored, ready to be brought out when pressure needed to be applied. That same afternoon, the panel of judges compiled all records related to his actions toward the victim, Tontin Nhi. They prepared a detailed report including a timeline, evidence, witness statements, test results, and images from the ATM camera. Everything was ready to be submitted to the provincial authorities to expedite the prosecution process. Many officers believed that just one severe sentence for this case would be enough to prevent him from causing further harm. On the night of April 30, 2006, an investigator returned from a remote area with notes related to other missing persons cases. Although the names did not match Lakan, a middle-aged man named Lu appeared. The team was exhausted but still carefully reviewed everything. Since nothing matched the DNA or evidence, everyone concluded it would be difficult to clarify all aspects of the case. They would have to wait for more time or for the suspect to confess. On May 1, 2006, the Special Investigation Team decided to complete the remaining stages in the case file for prosecuting the murder charge. The investigation into robbery was still maintained and expanded, but they understood that it would take a lot of time. Throughout this period, he continued to refuse to cooperate. The police were confident, with concrete evidence, that regarding the murder of Tontin Nhi, he could not escape punishment. As for the past accidents, without forensic evidence, it would be difficult to convict him. However, the investigation team was always ready in case new witnesses appeared or he changed his attitude. On May 2, 2006, all preparations were completed to hand over the case file to higher authorities. The Special Investigation Team tallied at least 6 cases of death or disappearance related to Ton Lakan over the past 18 years. All of these remained at the level of suspicion. At present, he was only being prosecuted for the case in Mok Chau district. If more evidence emerged later, additional charges could still be filed. Some young officers felt regretful for not having clarified all the cases, but consoled themselves that bringing him to justice through the Tontin Nhi case was already a solid step forward. On the evening of May 2, 2006, the Special Investigation Team finalized the plan, sending all documents and expanded materials to the Provincial Police Department, requesting that the case file be maintained for monitoring. All localities where he had previously lived were notified to coordinate and preserve the possibility of reopening old cases if new evidence was discovered. With this step, the direct investigation phase came to a close, shifting to judicial proceedings against his acts of murder and robbery. On May 3, 2006, at the provincial headquarters, the authorities held a lengthy meeting attended by representatives from the Procuracy and the Mok Chau District Special Investigation Team. The meeting focused on key issues. They reviewed the progress of finalizing the indictment, compiling testimonies, evidence, and exhibits to prepare the case file for prosecution against Ton Lacan. To limit the chance of him denying the charges, the investigation team drafted a dossier explaining each act, from making calls at public phones, withdrawing money with an ATM card, to the bloodstain on the rock at the scene. That afternoon, the Procuracy representative requested to listen again to his initial testimony recording. Contradictions emerged. Sometimes he claimed the victim acted voluntarily, other times he blamed an accident for the death, revealing his attempt to conceal his violent actions. At the same time, the forensic conclusion about the tree branch marks and strangulation confirmed the crime. So even though he has not confessed, the case file is still enough to convict him. On the morning of May 4, 2006, two investigators returned to the Provincial Detention Center for the final confrontation to observe his reaction. They presented and scientifically analyzed the type of sleeping pills found in the house in Bak Luong village. When compared with the sample of the victim's gastric fluid, the suspicious residue and active ingredients matched completely, with a dosage sufficient to render the victim incapable of resistance. Next, they pointed out the results of comparing the rope fibers, showing that the fiber bundles matched and still had stains from the victim's clothing. Finally, the ATM camera clearly recorded him holding the victim's card on March 12, 2006, at a time when no one yet knew the victim had died. All of this evidence pieced together formed a complete crime. After hearing everything, he bowed his head and sighed, but still did not admit to the crime. He only repeated, "I had no intention of killing anyone. It was an accident, beyond my control." Nevertheless, the investigation team was satisfied because they had objective evidence, not dependent on a subjective confession. After the confrontation, they packed up the documents, preparing to conclude the investigation phase. On May 6, 2006, the Special Task Force officially submitted the case file to the prosecutor's office, recommending that Ton Lacan be prosecuted for murder and robbery in the Ton Tin Ngi case. The file included documents proving he had withdrawn money from the victim's account, lied about their relationship, and left traces of assault and violation, aiming for a severe sentence. The task force also noted previous suspicious cases. Although the possibility of additional prosecution was limited, they recommended that the authorities pay attention. On May 7, 2006, a representative from the prosecutor's office assessed that the chain of evidence in the case was very solid. He would have little chance of escaping conviction. Even though the series of family accidents was not directly mentioned, they considered this a reference factor to be weighed as necessary. From this day on, the official trial preparation process for the Ton Tin Ngi case was set in motion. The Special Task Force agreed to only provide additional information if requested by the court, while also ensuring that all data was transparent, leaving him no grounds to complain about coercion or lack of evidence. By May 29, 2006, all legal procedures had been completed, paving the way for the authorities to issue the decision to carry out the death sentence for the perpetrator. There were no more delays. The case was officially closed. As initially assessed, this was a brutal murder for property, accompanied by numerous signs of concealment and cunning violation. After 3 attempts to evade and avoid responsibility, he ultimately could not escape his tragic fate. According to the official enforcement notice issued the same day, this is the final verdict, marking the end of a string of crimes that lasted for many years. As the case closed, the image of the perpetrator's cruelty and cunning remained deeply etched in people's minds. The traces he had cleverly concealed for years, those seemingly trivial details, ultimately became the key to unlocking the entire terrifying chain of crimes. This story is not only a wake-up call for vigilance, but also a testament to the unwavering determination of those who pursue justice to the very end. We cannot change the past, but with each case, the most valuable lesson is learning how to protect ourselves and those around us. In the end, those seemingly trivial details fit together perfectly. The lottery ticket on the chest, the hands, the rope with matching fibers, the cash withdrawal schedule, and sleeping pills in the forensic samples. These clues exposed the secret kept for 8 years. It was not a confession, but the evidence itself that revealed the truth. This story teaches us 3 things. Every clue matters if you are patient enough to connect them. Even the most careful person makes mistakes when they feel invisible, and alertness, though subtle, is essential in daily life. If today's episode resonated with you in any way, leave a comment, hit like, subscribe and share so I have more reasons to keep shedding light on other hidden corners, those shadowy sides of cases, where we learn to look straight into the darkness to know which side of the line we stand on.